we get underway, I have a couple of folks that are here with brief announcements. Walter, why don't you start? This is Walter South, good friend.
Actually, I'm a PhD candidate in Dublin, and I'm doing my thesis on affordable housing. I'm teaching a course here in New York City, starting in January, the second Thursday of the month, January, February, March, and April, at the Red Oak, 106th Street. You can attend the course for free, or you can take it on Skype from Dublin for $100. I have outlines of the course here. I'll put them on the table in the back. You can pick them up. Thank you.
Also, I'm going to be speaking in a church here in New York next Sunday, and I would like to invite a representative to tell us a few things about that, please. George.
Yes, good evening. My name is George Duckett, and I'm on the Board of Trustees at the Community Church in New York, Unitarian Universalist. And Professor Wolff has agreed to give a presentation on Sunday, the 22nd, and it's about the international scene, the international markets, and what this may mean to us. Just coming in this evening, I was reading where China, their automobile company, BYD, they will sell 100,000 of their electric vehicles in the next year, and that's the same number that Chevy sold in the last 7 years. So the market this will have implications on that. We're asking for a donation of $10 for this, but no one's going to be turned away. And the reason why we ask for it, it does cost money to carry these presentations out. Anyway, the Unitarian Church is on 35th Street between Park and Madison and Park, and it's going to be held in the big auditorium. So it's at 1:30, and we'd like to see as many of you as possible come out. And I have some flyers. Thank you.
Thank you both. I appreciate that both the opportunity to talk in the church and the opportunity to work with Walter South. He's a very modest fellow, but he knows more about public housing and the crisis of it than anyone I've ever met. So, plus he has hands-on experience building public affordable housing here in a country that puts every conceivable obstacle in the way of doing that. Okay, let's get underway, and as often as we always do, I want to remind you that there are chairs up here, folks, if you're still looking, scattered around. These evenings are sponsored by 3 organizations: the Judson Memorial Church, in whose facility you are sitting, and we are very deeply appreciative of the kindness and generosity of the church in making this space available to us. In the words of the minister, that she believes that what we do here is part of the mission of the church. And what a world it would be if other churches had that idea as well. And maybe someone watching or listening around the world will be inspired. The second organization is the Left Forum, which is an organization that puts on that big conference, usually once a year. In the spring. It's been doing it at John Jay College over the last few years. And it's planning on doing another one in the spring of 2018. But I'm particularly happy to let you all know that for the first time, the Left Forum has decided to sponsor a West Coast Left Forum. And the reason is there's that much interest. And for people on the West Coast to come all the way to New York is an expensive piece of transportation, coming to a city that's expensive to visit. And so on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th of November, I'm talking particularly to those of you that will see this electronically, in Los Angeles will be the first left-west No, Left Coast Forum, my apology. I have to learn the new name. But there will be the first Left Forum for the West Coast, November 3rd, 4th, and 5th in Los Angeles. I believe the intent is to alternate between Los Angeles and other cities on the West Coast, San Francisco, Seattle, and Vancouver, because they all will be participating. And you can get all the information you might be interested in about it by simply going to our website at the Left Forum, leftforum.org, really simple, and all the details about the Left Coast Forum are there as well. And finally, Democracy at Work, which is the organization that literally produces these evenings, that records them on video, as Brian is doing there in the back, that uploads these evenings within 24 hours. This will be available on YouTube. And in case you're wondering, it is viewed pretty much every month by between 50 and 100,000 people around the world. It's an amazing process. We get emails from everywhere. So I want to remind the audience that's going to see this electronically that all the nice people here have coughed up $10 to help defray the costs. And if you are interested, you can certainly go to our websites, democracyatwork.info, very simple, all one word, democracyatwork.info, and kick in your $10 if you find it worthwhile. Lastly, we ask people, if they're interested, to sponsor these evenings. And that means being a bit more generous with your money to help us cover the costs. And so I want to thank, which we do at the beginning of each evening, the sponsor for today's, October's presentation. And the name is Karsten, C-A-R-S-T-E-N, from Switzerland. So we are being sponsored this evening by our Swiss, or a part of our Swiss audience. We are very pleased, honored, flattered by the foreign, outside of the United States, interest in what we do and the support for it. If anyone watching this or here tonight might want to consider being a sponsor, it's very easy to find out. You go to our website, democracyatwork.info/sponsor, and there everything about that is available. Sorry for all these announcements, but luckily we're doing a lot of things, so I have to present them to you. If you are a fan of the weekly hour-long program, which is a major part of what Democracy at Work does, it's an hour-long program that I host, although I'm hoping soon that there will be others who will do this with me. But in any case, we do this hour program. It started 5.5 years ago here on WBAI in New York City, where it is still heard, at least when they're not raising funds. But we've expanded. We now have a little over 90 stations that broadcast it every week across the United States. And we are now available on YouTube in a video form. In other words, it's now a radio program, but you can also see it as a television program where it's me doing the radio program on the, well, no, it's a model of a person whose name I won't mention, but you can guess. If you are interested in taking a look at the weekly program, you can join 700 other fans who do this by means of a website called Patreon.com. If you have never heard of it, take a look. P-A-T-R-E-O-N, Patreon.com. And if you join, which you can do for as little as $3 a month, you are then given a whole lot of free access to these television programs and a whole bunch of other stuff that we put up there. It's a way for us to raise money, but also a way for you anywhere in the world to access this. And finally, the podcast is available at no cost on our website and via iTunes and iHeartRadio. So we are now really reaching huge numbers of people. Free Speech TV also carries the program. It's a remarkable thing for those of you who know what we do here every month and what I do on the radio every week, that we now reach somewhere between 40 and 50 million Americans. And I'm not sure that someone saying the things I do has ever been in that position before in this country. So I'm a little awestruck by it. On the other hand, I would not be honest if I didn't tell you that I enjoy it. Okay. Two things before we begin that are substantive. I'm taking advantage of my position here. I understand that, but I hope you bear with me. I was struck, as I'm sure many of you were, by the controversy, which is not over, that began when a group of athletes decided during the national anthem to get down on a knee to show that they were distressed about some directions in American society, particularly having to do with this deeply entrenched problem of racism that we wrestle with. A very peaceful, a very mild way of saying we are concerned. They didn't interfere in the football game or any of the other sports that later it spread to. They created a problem for no one, really. And they invited the country to say, oh, somebody's feeling pretty strongly about something. Maybe there's something I can learn by hearing what they feel. And in reaction, this extraordinary president did something that I found so compelling that I want to say something to you about it. Something different from what I assume you've heard in the press. What struck me was the very capitalist way Mr. Trump responded. That here were people who wanted to have a conversation about something they felt strongly about. Something that everybody who's not asleep knows is a serious problem in this country. And his response was to suggest firing them. Only an employer thinks like that. If I have a worker who has a problem, a question, a dispute, something to bring up about what's going on in the factory or the office or the store, one reaction is to ask, well, what is it? What's the problem? How do we address? None of that. You don't understand your place, so I'm going to fire you. The important thing to understand is that that's what comes into the mind of an employer person. It's a way of controlling, because it's the ultimate power, in a sense, that an employer has, to take from you the job, the source of your income, the sustenance of your family. And when confronted, even in the mildest way, with an issue you want to have some discussion about, the response is, I can and I will use my power to fire you. If you remember Mr. Trump's behavior, he was inviting owners, capitalists like him, of the teams. Just fire them if you don't like. This is a mentality. It has nothing to do with Mr. Trump. It has to do with what this society puts at the top and the powers that it gives. On the other hand, it is also about Mr. Trump. So here was the second thing I found stunning since we've last met. At the end of World War II, a war that was the most horrible anyone could imagine, a bunch of countries in the world who had been on various sides of that struggle decided to get together and make an organization, the United Nations, whose point and purpose was that international disputes, when countries have an argument, a disagreement, a conflict, not to resolve it by mass slaughter. That's the point. That was why the UN was created, and everybody signed on to that. Now, Mr. Trump, his first and so far only speech to the United Nations is to say that if he doesn't get what he wants from North Korea, he will obliterate, I believe that was his word, or words to that effect. He will obliterate that country. It takes a special person who represents the one country on earth that ever dropped atomic weapons on anybody to go to the institution set up to prevent it and threaten to do it again. I mean, it takes your breath away, or it took mine away. It's extraordinary. And to have a society allow that, to sit there and get up the next day and go to work, as if this wasn't some kind of extraordinary move, is itself pretty extraordinary. Next item. These are preliminaries. I haven't got to the meat of it. We are seeing something around the world which I want to make sure everybody understands is a deeply economic event, although it's not handled that way. One of the things that happens when a class system, an economic system, disintegrates or begins to disintegrate, a process that can take a long time. But one of the signs of this kind of disintegration is when existing arrangements, social arrangements that have existed for a long time, become suddenly, or at least it appears to be suddenly, unbearable, untenable. You can't stand it, you have to break out. And one of the forms in social situations is when societies, which are always composed of different people, different groups that got together to make a country or a society, when suddenly they can't stand being part of what they were. It's almost a kind of psychological displacement in which, the classic example, you know, you're upset at your job and you come home and you kick the dog. The dog isn't your problem, and kicking him is not a solution. You're upset about other things, but you've displaced it. Well, when capitalism begins to collapse, and we can't stand the anxiety, the fear, the privation, we kick a dog. But what is the dog? The dog is, for lack of a better term, nationalism. We begin to be unbearably hostile to people we've been living with. The British, enraged about what was happening to them because of British capitalism, decided to separate from Europe. Interesting move. You are in Europe. This isn't going to be easy. Which, if you follow the news, it isn't being easy. It's destroyed the conservative government. It is now giving Jeremy Corbyn an opportunity to become the next Prime Minister of Great Britain in a way nobody thought possible until literally 3 months ago. You saw it, for those of you who paid attention, when the people in Scotland suddenly decided, UK? Who wants to be in the UK? I'm not interested. Now you're seeing it in Catalonia, as the Spanish government tries to repress the independence movement that has become very strong in Catalonia. Catalonia is the region of what we used to call Spain, around Barcelona, that area, and threatens to dissolve Spain. Mr. Macron in France, who must understand that very similar problems exist just below the surface in France, immediately supported the Spanish government, another sign of a courageous leader, which he hopes one day to be. And you also see it in Eastern Europe, for those of you that are paying attention. The Eastern Europeans, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, after 1989, had wonderful expectations. They were all going to be like Germany and Sweden overnight. They wouldn't be Poland and Czechoslovakia and all of that. They would suddenly they didn't plan on becoming Greece or Italy or Portugal, which is exactly where they're headed. And it's an enormous disappointment what capitalism has in store for them. And they are angry, and they've decided to blame Europe sort of like the British in voting Brexit. Please understand, the fight going on here is mostly a displacement. That's why you're going to see on both sides of many of these issues people you normally see as political enemies, a left and a right. The independence movement in Catalonia has businessmen alongside of extreme left-wing radicals, the latter of whom are quite important and quite powerful, but who are in a complicated, which is the nicest way I can put it, alliance with people with very different motives and plans for what an independent Catalonia might be. These are signs of social disintegration, things that were unthinkable because they don't know how to get at the economic disintegration. And that's the fault, above all, of the left, which hasn't been able, and there are reasons for that that are not only the left's fault, don't misunderstand me, but the left has been unable to articulate an analysis and a program to deal with the underlying economic, and that leaves the field clear for all kinds of other things. It's here in America too. The economic malaise becomes the hatred of immigrants, as if they're the problem. It's like kicking the dog. The immigrant isn't the cause of your difficulty, and expelling them isn't going to solve it. You poor, poor sap. You're being played with. You're being directed on a fool's errand, which has the usual results, which will make you feel foolish. Okay, enough. Let me turn to some of the economic events that happened since we last met and that I think need some analysis before we get to the big topics. I want to begin by recognizing an extraordinary comment by Senator Ron Johnson, Republican of Wisconsin. Here's what he said in answer to a student who asked him a question, and he had the bad taste of answering in such a way that everyone could write it down, and so the press did. What we have as rights, says our good senator, are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. He read that somewhere. We have the right to freedom. Past that point, everything else is a limited resource that we have to use our opportunities given to us so that we can afford those things. Now, what had the student asked him to get such an answer? The student said, isn't it a right that everybody have enough food, have an education, have medical care as they need it to live their lives? No, said the good senator. We only have the freedom to pursue those things. Past that point, let me read it to you again, everything else is a limited resource that we have to use our opportunities given to us. Which, if you understand the English language, would lead to the question, given to us? By whom? How? In other words, my access to all the resources of life depend on the opportunities given to me. Well, gee, that might suggest, I'm not saying you have to go there, but it might suggest that little Baron Trump, for those of you that are not familiar with it, this modest name is what Mr. Trump applied to his son. His name, Baron. If he'd had a second one, probably be Duke. Baron has been given more opportunities than you have. But that must be what this man's reading of the Constitution is. You're born in the right place, you have opportunities given to you. You're born in the wrong place, you don't. And that's fine. We are not to question, we are not to change the distribution of what is given. We're to live with it as if that's it. It's like a crap game. It's like cards. You got a good hand, we got a bad one. Who's to blame? No, but it's the way the game is played. Only this time it's your life. We elect people that reflect where the society is. Mr. Ron Johnson, as a senator from a state that has a long history of public socialist thinking, Robert La Follette, for those of you who know your American history, they produced Ron Johnson, who thinks that we have only the right to freedom. Food, clothing, shelter, and medical care depends on what you were given by whoever it was that gave you anything. I've been criticized, and rightly, for having too many negative things to say to you, and thereby creating distress on your way home. And I don't want to do that. So I have tried to find, it's not easy, uplifting things, but I found one. So I want to make sure we're all aware of it. This one has to do with Norway. Anyone here from Norway? No, okay. Well, too bad, because the Norwegians did something remarkable. I believe it's the only country on earth that had took the following step over the last month. All sports teams, all athletic teams that are government-sponsored and government-trained and so forth across the spectrum of sports will, for the first time, pay the female athletes exactly as much as they pay the male athletes. No other country, I believe, certainly the United States, it's night and day, the difference of what's being paid. The whole country is watching a game tonight from which women, of course, are excluded. We don't think like that, but that's because we are accustomed to this sort of thing. The Norwegians decided that that's no good. That's what I want to talk to you about because I'm an economist. It means that the Norwegian government, and it's wildly popular, polls are overwhelmingly in favor of this new policy. It means that the Norwegian people have decided that the price of something, in this case, the price of the income of an athlete who represents the country, so that's what the payment to an athlete is. You're buying the service, the performance, the skill that an athlete displays. That the price of something shouldn't be set by the market, by some anonymous play of supply and demand, by manipulative companies and advertising agencies trying desperately to manipulate supplies and demands. Why you should let that determine the price? We don't want that in Norway. We want prices that have a specific social effect, and we're going to do prices in terms of the impact on society. We want a society that values the female athlete as much as the male athlete. And one way to do that is to pay them for the same rigorous training and display and performance that they can show. Prices that are designed to achieve a social effect. What an idea. Instead of the price being decided by a company whose goal is to make profits for itself, we're going to have prices that reflect the social consensus of how things should be. What a remarkable idea. And if you follow that out, you become an enemy of capitalism, and your mother will be very upset. So don't do that. Next. A recent speech by Ralph Nader, since last month, caught my eye. And Ralph does a very useful thing, he always does. And in this case, what Ralph Nader did was to point out that the stock market, which has been rising very nicely over the last few years, is rising very nicely for a very particular reason that has absolutely nothing to do with the underlying health or well-being of the American economy. That's an important contribution, since most leading politicians reason exactly the other way. If the stock market is healthy, therefore everything is in good shape. His argument, no. And here's what he does. You get an A in a course for this. Here's what he does. He points out that an enormous part of the money coming into the stock market to buy shares is money coming from the companies that are buying their own shares. In other words, this is not complicated. General Motors is a company, has millions of shares outstanding. General Motors makes profits from selling you cars. Now the question is, after they sold you the cars and they have the profits, what are they going to do with them? Under the laws of capitalism, the board of directors of General Motors decides what to do with the profits. Let's be real clear. The board of directors, 15 people, a very small fraction of what's in this room. 15 people sit around a table, admittedly, an oak table, wood-paneled room, lots of people scurrying around with plates of food and coffee and whiskey. But the 15 people sit in a room and they decide what to do with the profits. Profits produced by 200,000 employees of General Motors. They all worked to produce the profits. But you know the game in capitalism because you all live it. The 200,000 who work to produce the profits go home at the end of each day to get ready for the next day when they do the same thing. They have absolutely no say over what happens with the profits they helped to produce. This is remarkable. Those 15 people are free to use those profits any which way they want. They could, for example, hire lots of people, creating jobs and improving the communities where those people live who get the jobs. They could do that if they wish. But they could also decide, why should I do that? I am going to the stock market, take my billions of profits, and buy shares in our own company. How exciting. Here's what the effects will be, as Nader shows us. Number one, the price of the stock will go up because suddenly there's a big buyer. There's no corresponding seller. There's just a big new buyer of GM stock, which is GM. So it's good. The price goes up. Now, why would the executives, why would the directors, those 15 people, do a thing like that? Because they own shares. And if they own 1 million shares and they took the profits that you all worked to produce and boosted up the price of the thing, they'd be boosting up the price of the shares they own, which the next day they sell. You with me? This maneuver is called high finance. And if you go to business school after 3 or 4 years, you get an MBA, and you can say high finance too. And you can do these things. And Nader shows it's an amazing large part of the whole story of the stock. It's not the whole story, but it's a large part of the story. And he even explains why this happened. Because Clinton, under the Bill Clinton government, put a cap. They had a cap. If you earned more than $1 million a year as a top executive, a member of a board of directors, the company couldn't take the more than $1 million as a cost, the way they could in other cases. It was considered to be just giving them a boondoggle. Okay, we won't get paid. We'll take the money and buy the shares and boost our income that way. You understand? That's how the system works. They're free to do that. When next you read about how the stock market is going up, please keep in mind the kinds of maneuvers like this one that make that happen. Don't be fooled. A healthy stock market is not a sign that an economy is in good shape, not even close. And I'm going to be giving you in a few minutes a whole list of bits of information to suggest that we are not in a recovery and that our economy is actually the way you experience it and not the way you read about in the newspaper. There's a famous joke about the last years of the Hitler regime in Germany. Two Germans are sitting on a hill overlooking the Rhine River, and one says to the other, "You know, Hitler keeps telling us the economy's in great shape, but I don't see any boats going up and down the Rhine River the way you would expect if the economy was humming." And the other one says to him, "You silly person, you don't find out about the traffic on the Rhine by looking at the Rhine. You look in the newspaper." That's where we are. Next item. This was an item that came to me in an email from Japan and asked me to look into something which I did not know about, and I'm a little bit embarrassed to tell you that, but it's true. And so I did. And it's about something called karoshi. My apologies to Japanese folks if I am butchering the pronunciation of this word. K-A-R-O-S-H-I, at least in the English. Karoshi. It seems to mean something extremely close to overwork in Japanese. And here's the problem. In Japan, a growing number of people in recent years have died from overwork. One in particular, Miwa Sado, a 31-year-old young woman, died in 2013 from overwork. She was a reporter working on the state-run broadcasting outlet NHK in Japan. She had done 160 hours of overtime per month. That's double what 40 hours a week, 4 weeks, you get it? That's an 80-hour week, not a 40-hour week. And she died. She killed herself. I mean, not intentionally, but she died of the effort of the overwork. And the NHK broadcasting outfit, the state broadcaster, delayed a long time, admitting it all, but has now issued an apology. It is sorry. Then there was another case. This one was 24-year-old at an private company, advertising agency, Dentsu, D-E-N-T-S-U. Died after jumping off the roof of employee housing in 2015. Japan's labor ministry ruled that Matsuri Takahashi's death was from overwork, being required to work a number of hours that literally drove him to suicide. There was a trial. The employer was found guilty. And the Dentsu was ordered to pay a fine, 500,000 yen, which works out to $4,400. That was worth one dead Japanese worker. It's causing a major movement inside Japan of outrage at the vast number of people who are now basically being required to do overwork as a condition for keeping the job. And there seems to be no end or no limit to doing this. Again, the economics. What is going on here? Up until 10 or 20 years ago, the period after World War II was a period in which fairly well-organized labor unions negotiated contracts with employers that specified how many hours you could require a worker to work, time and a half if there was overtime. Overtime usually had to be voluntary. If it was not voluntary, it had to be strictly controlled as to how it was done, etc. Now we have the gig economy, or if you're really perverted, the sharing economy. A word designed to cover a multitude of sins. It's everywhere, and it is killing people, and it is causing a recognition among employers that it is profitable. You get more work out of workers, more hours, by having them on a loose contract kind of arrangement as opposed to the old union contract. And as an economist, I can't help but remember early on in Volume 1 of Marxist Capital, there's a wonderful long discussion which Marx calls the length of the working day, in which he explains to those of us who want to learn how and why in capitalism it never stops. The employer always wants more time during which you create that surplus that he analyzes as the core of profits. That the struggle for a 12-hour day and then a 10-hour day and then an 8-hour day, this is an endless struggle, and you have to keep fighting because no sooner do you have it than they work around it, they work underneath it. They have so now we have the gig economy and the sharing economy and the complaint of exhausted Uber and Lyft drivers that they can't see straight after 27 hours of work. It's the same. It's about profit. It's about making more money, and in the process, forgetting that these are human beings who have limited bodies and minds. This is not a problem of a bad employer. This is a problem of a system that drives every employer on pain of being competed out of existence to behave in this way. You don't solve this problem by a fine of $4,000. And you don't solve this problem by exposing it, important as it is. Punish the individual capitalist who does it, that'll just be replaced by another capitalist who, in the same system, will behave in the same way. We've had the experience. We've done it. The system has to change, or else you don't solve the problem. That's not some abstract idea. It's the practical consequence of understanding what hasn't worked to deal with this problem. Okay. Next item. Not much for me to say, but I want to underscore what it means about the American economy. Last week there was a poll conducted by the Wall Street Journal together with NBC News. And in it, for the first time in many years, I believe it's the first time ever for this poll, a majority of men in the United States, not women, men, believe that college isn't worth it anymore. Never had that before. In other words, we've achieved something in America, and I want to mark the milestone. We have raised the price of a college education so high that the ability of the mass of people to pay for it is gone, and the only solution is to take on a level of debt which is unsustainable in order to get the degree. And in that circumstance, with that relationship, we are discovering that a majority of young men are saying, it's not worth it. If I look at the income I'm likely to get with a BA degree and the debts and costs of getting it. But the great crisis here isn't that we are becoming a society, and don't be fooled by the details and the calculations. This is a society which is going in the opposite direction of the last 300 years, when everything was get more education, give more of your people more of an opportunity to learn and to think and to read and to develop themselves. We are going the other way. That's an amazing achievement.
What percentage of women?
significantly lower. In other words, women believe in education, men don't. It's largely because women are still moving into education from which they were blocked for a long time. And it is also the case, for those, I don't have the statistics with me tonight, women are moving up in their relative income relative to men. I mean, it's very severe. The pattern of men supporting Mr. Trump because of outrage, not only at the difficulties they're having, but also by watching the women who are not doing that badly relative to them. That's a big change in America. And that goes with these statistics. But I want to drive home the more general philosophic point. Education, I know this is amazing to have to say this, but in this country you have to. Education is not all about how much money you earn in the rest of your life. It's about who you are. What education, those 4 years in college, if you can get them, those are times when you literally figure out who you are. You discover you have interests, skills, passions you didn't know about that couldn't be developed in the public school and in the family for all the complex reasons, except of course your family, which had no problems. But every other family, right? College, you go away, you're at a new age, you open up, you encounter people who inspire you in one way or another. You're going to take all that away? Learn that what the world has to offer? Not getting educated is like having a diet that consists in the morning of gruel, and in the midday, gruel, and in the evening, gruel with salt. This, after a number of months, is awful. It would be nice to give you just a short course in things like meat, or vegetables, or fruits, and you can understand, my goodness, what an experience one can have. That's what education is about. What poetry is, and what anthropology is, and what the history is out of which you come, and which will help you understand your own conflictual feelings because it's a history in you. Education is something we either give to one another in a society that we care about, or we don't. And this country is saying, don't. And like always in America, as we crush down part of our society, we arrange it in such a way that individuals make an individual choice to do this. That's what the poll is. See that? These individual men are choosing, see? And so it's just a matter of choice. It's nobody's fault. They're just choosing. And you wouldn't want to dictate to them. Like, what? Of course you're dictating to them. That's why the price of tuition is what it is. That's dictated. And the cost of borrowing, that's dictated. And the job you're going to get or not get, and the income you're not going to get, that's all dictated. You're not free. At the end of the process, you have a little choice among the things you have no choice about at all. And you fetishize that choice. That's the way this system works. Because that way, the bad things that happen to you in the rest of your life, you will blame on you. And that's the only way this system survives. Because you do that. Footnote. In 2003, the total student debt in the United States was $200 billion. 2003, $200 billion. First quarter of 2017, so what ended on the 31st of March, 1.4 trillion. So in those years, roughly 14 years, student debt went up 7 times. Faster than almost any other statistic about anything you could come up with. And by the way, the crash of 2008 made no difference. Just kept going up and up, just straight line. And if you want to see the graph, I have it up here. You're more than welcome to see it. But you can see, I think, from even there, what it looks like. No wobbling, no up and down, just up. Yeah, and the interest, of course, everybody has to pay interest on this $1.4 trillion. Now what I want to do, before we get to the big topics, I want to give you a quick, oh no, there's one more before I do this. Today's New York Times, so it's a hot item, carries a story that is so, I don't know what, it's such a wonderful refutation of the notion we live in an economy that's recovering that I have to bring it to you today. So you can get it today. 10% of New York City public school pupils are homeless. Let me do this again. 1 out of 10 of the kids in public schools in this city over the last year experienced homelessness, some for the entire year, some for parts of the year. It's a 6% increase over the year before. The number of students homeless for part of the year or all of the year, 111,500 kids. The data was released by the New York State Technical and Education Assistance Center, which is funded by the New York State Education Department. Okay, this is going to take us back to Ron Johnson's comment. Why? There have been 100 studies. They all show exactly the same thing. If you're a homeless kid, you have an unstable home life. You're moving from one family that may take you in for a while, one relative who may help you for a while, to another. You're changing from one school district to another. You have lots of absences because of all the turmoil and conflict and difficulty of working all this out, which means you fall behind in the school and you never catch up. Now, if you know what kind of conditions make a kid homeless, you will notice something. You're taking people already in a difficult place in life and you're making sure they never get out of it. You're crushing them. In New York City alone, 111,500 children. Can you blame the children for the homelessness? Even Ron Johnson can't do that. They're kids. Their homelessness is not their own doing. They didn't choose it, did they? They're victims. And you have a system that makes sure that if you're victimized as a kid, we're going to do that to you for the rest of your life. Mr. Johnson said, the opportunities given to you is what you got. What's given to those 111,000? What exactly was given to them in the way of an opportunity? Come on. The city of New York has 1 in 10 students in 2017 who's homeless and falling further and further behind, meaning they can't finish school and they can't get a job and they're going to be tempted by illegal activity. You know the story. It's as old as Methuselah. Right? No recovery. No recovery. And we have a mayoral race. Any of them talk about it? Any of them have a program for it? No, not at all. Okay, the next thing I want to do is I want to talk about a group of corporations. And I want to be upfront with you about why I'm doing it. We have really no choice, most of us, but to trust the corporations we depend on. When you get that drink out of the soda machine, what's in there, you trust it because you put it in your mouth and you swallow it and there it goes into your chemistry. And ditto when you get in a car and ditto when you sit down somewhere and all of it. So I want to do a little bit of survey of where that trust leads. And I don't mind telling you, I hope you begin to question, maybe a bit more than you did. And I'm going to give you examples from all over the place because I want you to see this as a global phenomenon. So I begin. Monarch Airlines. Any of you know what Monarch Airlines is? Good, not. It's a small British airline company, private company. On October 2nd, Monarch Airlines announced that it was bankrupt and that therefore it wasn't going to fly anymore, which was not good news for the 100,000 people who had bought and paid for tickets, which were now valueless. Nor did it help the other 300,000 people who had bought tickets for future flights. Did people know that Monarch was in trouble? Yes. I'm sorry, you're looking for a place to sit? Could someone raise their hand if you got a chair near you? And so, no, it's fine. There's lots of offers. There's chairs all over. Okay. Monarch Airlines, they knew they were in trouble. You don't go bankrupt overnight. You know, months and months of. But it's capitalism, and they didn't want to let people know that they were in trouble, because that might have led you or me to get a ticket on another airline, so we wouldn't get stuck like this. This is called, very important in business school, an example of capitalist efficiency, what I just described. They're taking care of the profits of that airline right to the day they announce you are not going anywhere with that airline ticket. Please recline on that plastic seat in that plastic airport forever. I'm going to give you several more examples. I'm trying to pick the ones. Okay, yes, here we go. My apologies for this particular example, but it's useful. There is something, I don't know exactly what this is, so I'm going to give you the words and don't explain it to me if you don't. A vaginal mesh implant. Clearly something you would probably want to avoid. This is produced by Johnson & Johnson, a major pharmaceutical company, and they got themselves into trouble when it turned out that this product could do a lot of damage down there, and that it wasn't a good idea, and that it was interesting because it was produced by the Ethicon. You can't make this stuff up. Ethicon, which is a unit of Johnson & Johnson. Ethicon makes this thing, and it turns out it wasn't as good as older products used for whatever the issue is that you could have. But it's important for pharmaceutical companies to come out with a new and better every 2 or 3 years, so that they can sell a lot of the old and crappy, and that's done. They made money on that, and now the new and better will replace the old and crappy. So the new and better was this thing which turned out to be new, but not better, worse. And they got themselves into real trouble when a woman who suffered from this went to court, sued them, and was awarded $57 million. Okay? In the course of the trial, it came out that there are, I just want you to know, emails years earlier when scientists and others inside the company were worried about the fact that there were complaints, and it turned out it wasn't better than the old things that they had sell. What do you do with these stories? I don't know. But pretending that they're not there, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to subject you to these and a few more. The Two Sisters Food Group. You probably never heard that unless you're British. It's the largest supplier of supermarket chicken in Great Britain. And because of the Guardian newspaper, a good newspaper in England, they were exposed on video for doing two things. One, picking up pieces of chicken that had fallen off the conveyor belt onto the floor and putting them back on the conveyor belt. That might not be so bad, but here's the one I like. Altering the kill dates on the chicken. In other words, that chicken in the supermarket is really aged chicken. And if you know something about chicken, aging does not do to chicken what it does to wine. Washington State has sued pharmaceutical companies, Purdue Pharma, Johnson & Johnson, Teva Pharmaceuticals, Endo International, and Allergan. I want you all to know them. For misadvertising OxyContin. That's a pain medicine that is part of the opioid crisis that is killing 60,000 or more Americans by overdose every year. Washington State and the city of Seattle has filed a separate lawsuit accusing Purdue in particular, but the others as well, deceptive marketing, convincing doctors and the public that the drugs had a low risk of addiction when they didn't, and that they were effective for treating chronic pain, which they aren't, etc., etc. I'm not done. Kobe Steel, a Japanese corporation, one of the biggest producers of steel, admitted over the last 2 or 3 days, this is a news story, that it had falsified data about the aluminum and the copper that it has sold around the world to many American companies that use that to produce automobiles and appliances, where it can be very dangerous if the tensile strength of the metal isn't what you claim it to be. Japan is having a rough year, or maybe more accurate, a rough X years. I'm just going to give you a short list. Last week, Nissan Motors, not a small company in Japan, admitted to falsifying data that required them to recall 1.2 million Nissan vehicles. Mitsubishi and Suzuki, two very large automobile companies in Japan, have now admitted faking the emissions data. You know, the way VW did and all the other companies. And then you all remember, or I assume you do, because we've talked about it at these meetings, the Takata airbags that are in all the automobiles and that were produced in such a way that if you have an impact, the airbag explodes, and if the car doesn't kill you on the impact, the shrapnel from the exploding bag will get you. And in each case, strong evidence, we don't want to prejudge the trial, strong evidence that they knew, and for a long period of time, they knew and they hid it. And that's to make more money, which they are driven to do. Then there is Edward Lampert of the ESL hedge fund. I don't know if any of you know Eddie Lampert. I'm playing, I don't know if his name is Eddie. Edward. He's a former Goldman Sachs banker, don't cheer. And he is famous for leaving Goldman Sachs and purchasing, with some friends, a decrepit, dying dinosaur called Sears Roebuck Company. And shortly after that, he merged one dinosaur with another. Sears was merged with Kmart. Some of you grew up, as I did, with Kmart. This magical banker, with the expertise of the Goldman Sachs brand, took the stock from $170 a share to its current price of $8 a share. If you owned it, you wouldn't be here tonight because you would be drowning in your own tears for having got stuck. And he announced just this last week that he was closing all the remaining Sears stores in Canada, and that would mean 12,000 jobs in Canada are gone, just as there were hundreds of thousands of jobs lost in the United States as the Sears business was wound down. Wonderful phrases that they used. One man, for those of you that care about democracy, one man, Edward Lampert, with a few associates, was in a position to take two very big corporations, Sears, Kmart, wipe them out, destroying tens of thousands of jobs and the communities in which these stores existed and in which these jobs were held. And he's very wealthy, made a fortune in the process of doing all this. We permit this. One guy becomes a billionaire, and the rest we don't count. We're so excited about that billionaire. And I'm sure, I don't know, but I'm sure that some very important cultural events in New York will be supported by Edward Lampert and the ESL. And you will go to the opera and you will see that one of the donors on the second page, a big donor. Next item. There's the last one. Yale University. I like to talk about Yale University. I should be honest and reveal to you that I went to that place, I graduated from that place, so it gives me a special good feeling to give something back. Yale's endowment, this is a wonderful phrase, the endowment. That means the money they've saved over the years, the money they've gathered that they haven't spent on educating anybody. They've just held it and accumulated it. And they have a lot, the neighborhood of $25 billion. Biggest endowment in the United States is Harvard's, 30-something billion, and then come a bunch of other schools. But Yale was very upset this last couple of weeks when it had to announce that as of the last full year, which ended June 30th of 2017, its endowment, its shares of stocks and bonds and real estate, only rose over the last year 11.3%. It felt very bad. Dartmouth, another one of these places, its endowment rose 14.6%. Harvard's only rose 8.1%. And I could go on, but let me drive home something to you. Unless you're a very unusual person, your wages didn't go up 8, 11, or 14% over the last year, did they? The average increase in wages in the United States over the last year is under 3%, okay? 2.8. And that doesn't take into account rising prices, because if you take those into account, there's basically been no increase in your wages at all, which most of you know. So here's a little clue. If you depend on wages, your income goes nowhere. But if you depend on investing your money, if you're a capitalist and you have billions and you're buying real estate and you're owning shares of stock, you have these results. 11%, 8%. The Harvard 8% is the bottom. Dartmouth is 14.6%. You know what this means? This means that those who have the wealth are becoming richer, and you aren't, which means the gap between rich and poor is widening fast. If the average worker gets under 3%, and these who are rich folks, these are like any rich person, only they're a rich university, they're growing at these numbers. The gap between rich and poor is going crazy. It's going faster, more unequal than it did up until now. Okay? That's the reality of the American economy. So the punchline in the little bit of time that I have. The American economy is in a place I've never seen it before, and I think I've told some of you this story. Because I went to the elite universities like Yale and Harvard and all those places, I know a lot of those people. We were school chums. We went to school together. And I'm friends with a few of them, and we occasionally get together, and some of them are economists like me, and we don't agree on how the American economy works, and we don't agree on how we got into this situation, and we sure don't agree on how to get out of it. So we don't agree on much. But we sit over our coffee, and we all look at each other and we say the following sentence: this is the worst condition of the American economy in our lifetimes. We agree. We're all surprised about it. We agree on that. Which means that there's a peculiar mass denial going on. We're in a country that persists in thinking it's okay, we're going to get better, we're on a recovery. All those phrases, all those words, those are all about not facing the mess you're in, the mess I've been documenting to you for the last hour. And I have lots more. This is easy. to find these examples. Nothing coming down the pike from Mr. Trump and the GOP begins to deal with any of this. You're going to be hearing in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and we're going to deal with it again in November because it's going to be very hot then, this topic, tax reform. You're going to hear about it forever. Everything in that tax reform makes this problem worse. It's just, there's no subtlety here. The money that the corporations have kept abroad to avoid paying taxes, which is in several trillions, is going to be brought back by giving them a tax holiday. Instead of paying the 35% they were supposed to, if they bring it back, they only have to pay 10%. That's the proposal from Mr. Trump. The corporate tax rate, now listed at 35%, is to be dropped to 20%. All estate taxes, federal estate taxes, erased. You know what an estate tax is? It's a simple idea that societies from biblical times have understood. The only fair way to have a society is if we all start more or less at the same place. That's what Mr. Ron Johnson of Wisconsin can't get his head around. We shouldn't have some people starting with millions and other people with nothing. Homeless kids in the school system on one hand and Baron Trump on the other. That's not an equal playing field, is it? So an estate tax says, okay, you can make a ton of money, you can enjoy it like crazy, but when you die, we're going to take some of it so you don't get crazy. We now have only a few thousand families that are subject to the federal income tax on estates. For those of you that are nervous, the first, I think it's roughly $11 million that you leave has no federal estate tax. Now, that's the law now. Thank God. The first 11 you can give to your children or anybody else. You only have to start paying on more than that, okay? That's what they're going to get rid of. There's only about 2,000 to 3,000 families in America that are subject to this. That's all. Because there are so many other ways of getting out of it. But you live in a society that is so out of control on this inequality that there's nothing holding them back anymore. There's no countervailing force. They're going to eliminate the tax for those 3,000 families who are the richest people on the planet. That's why they have more than 11 million to leave. What? A society that is now so unequal, that has wages going up at 3% and the endowment of a Harvard that has more money than God anyway is going to go up even further? By the way, just a footnote for those of you that are worried. Not only did Yale make 11% and Dartmouth 14%, but under the law of the United States, you know what the tax is on those money they made? Nothing. Zilch. Zero. Why? Because of our commitment to education. What? That's the argument. You commissioned, but you have 100,000 kids who have no home going to school. What commitment to education are you talking about? The one that happens to be a tax cut for the richest universities in the world. You have to take a step back. That's what I'm urging you all to do. Don't get caught in the weeds, the details of these taxes. I mean, if you want to, of course. But there are basically ways to babble continuously, and Mr. Trump is good at that, let's give him his due. Babble continuously about helping working people, helping the middle class. You talk like that all the time. Meanwhile, you do your business. And you hope people are distracted by tweets, by confusion, by yelling, by blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, you do what you've always been doing. You are living, and we are, in a society that is spinning out of control. This is the end of an empire. That doesn't mean the end is tomorrow or next year or in my lifetime or yours. Anyone who tells you they know how it's going to be, talk to somebody else. But these are all symptoms, from Mr. Trump through all the things I've talked. These are signs. Catalonia, Eastern Europe, these are signs. The system cannot function. It is resorting to crazier and crazier extremes that will blow up in its face. I don't know what to tell you to do about it, except, at the very least, don't join in the denial. Don't fake it all the time. Don't let the people around you do it. And if you have any interest in democracy at work, which is what our group is called, then here's the final point. Everything I talked about has to do with the decisions that are made by a tiny group of people who sit at the top of this system. The major shareholders, the boards of directors, I get the message. We do have to close down because of the rules of the church and so on, and we're about to end. But everything has to do with decisions that are made in a particular way by a particular group of people. They're tiny in number. They're the boards of directors at the top of the corporations. They're not invisible, they're not abstract. And here's a way to solve the problem that has been understood now for 200 years. If you want an economic system to serve the people, you got to put the people in charge. And what that means is not a handful who make profits, but everybody. You have to run every business as a collective, communal, democratic association of the people who work and the people who are served, the consumers. Put them together. Council of Consumers, a Council of Workers, a cooperative effort. It's been understood for a long time. It's now becoming the only way out of a system that is spinning into craziness and threatens to take all of us with it. Thank you very much.